All right, Raymie, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Thanks, Daniel. Excited to talk to you today, tell you a little bit about Dream and our work in facilities.
Amazing. Well, I am extra passionate about this topic because I actually got the chance to walk through one of your facilities with you just a week or two ago. So I can attest firsthand to some of the amazing work you guys are doing on the facilities front. But for those who don't know you or Dream, why don't we start with just a quick background before we dive into today's topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dream Charter School is based in New York City. We were founded in 1991 as Harlem RBI, when a group of volunteers turned an abandoned lot in East Harlem into a ball field for 75 boys from the community. Over the years, Dream has steadily evolved from a baseball program into a summer enrichment and after-school program. And in 2008, we opened our first charter school, Dream Charter School. And today, we serve more than 2,600 youth through a unique brand of programming, both in the classroom and on the field. And we have 7 schools in East Harlem in the Bronx, serving students in pre-K to 12, and are primarily based in private spaces. Um, my experience, I'm entering my second year as the chief operating officer at Dream. I've been here for now entering my 4th year almost. And I joined the organization in 2021 as the founding managing director of operations, which was right at the start of our organization's largest growth stage. I've been in education for 14 years now, with my experience centered in both operations and instructional leadership. And as COO, I'm responsible for overseeing networks, school-based operations across the organization, which includes food, facilities, health and safety, transportation, and procurement.
Love
Uh,
it.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're going to be talking about facilities, and certainly you guys have had a lot of growth, as you just alluded to. And I want to talk specifically about what it takes to be strategic when it comes to facilities planning. There's so many things that fall into the facilities category. And so I want to unpack what it looks like to manage buildings and some of the ins and outs of facilities design and whatnot today. But I feel like I need to start by bragging on you guys a little bit and maybe asking you to brag on yourself a little bit. There was an article by Fast Company that actually called one of your schools the most beautiful school in the world, not in New York City, not in the United States, in the world. So that's a pretty tall claim. So maybe we could start by you just telling us a little bit about that particular building before we get into some of the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned, our 7 schools are based out of primarily 3 private campuses in East Harlem and the South Bronx. And the bragging piece may be a little hard, but I think something that we are extremely proud of is the spaces that we're able to create and provide to our communities. And as someone who I myself am from Harlem, I grew up here, I went to school here. So this is something that's very near and dear to me. And one of the things that I'm most proud of in being part of the Dream community is that we believe the idea that place matters. And being part of the community, we share this belief each and every day. We believe that the place you go to school every day matters. When we step into beautiful, clean buildings or onto well-kept fields, it inspires us, our community, our young people to work, play better. And not only that, beautiful, clean spaces is what the community deserves. I remember going into our 20 Bruckner campus, which is the state of the art, close to 200,000 square feet building. And one of the things that when you walk in, oftentimes during tours, visits, we get the question, this is a school? And that's those are the type of spaces that should not be the exception, but should be the norm, and the type of schools that each and every one of our campuses have. But specific to our 20 Bruckner campus, it's a turn of the century ice factory. It was once under the care of American brewer Jacob Rupert, who unfortunately was also the Yankees owner. I'm a diehard Red
Had
Sox
to
fan,
had to
so.
sneak that in there. Had to sneak that in there.
But he was also known for he was the person who brought Babe Ruth to the Yankees. Dream Charter School Mott Haven houses 3 schools. So Mott Haven Elementary, Mott Haven Middle School, Dream High School. It's a pre-K to 12 campus, state of the art, has a gym, rooftop playground, has a patio, has what we call Hall of Dreams, which is library space, has community spaces, and really a space that is not only beautiful, but also one that's conducive to our grow the whole child model, and one that's conducive to really delivering on our extended day and extended year programming.
Love it. We'll try to link to some photos of the campus maybe in the show notes to give people a visual representation of what you're talking about. And building a new campus or renovating a building. In this case, you guys did it with an ice factory. There's all sorts of unique ways that charter schools are renovating different types of buildings and outfitting them to be schools. And most of the school, that listen to this podcast across the country have growth goals. Most schools aspire to, 3 years, 5 years. We want to add another building. We want to, add, middle school, whatever it might be. But generally speaking, that's a really big project. And so I want to spend some time better understanding, like, when you have a massive project like that's in the strategic plan, you want to put together a new building, like, who is actually in charge of that? Where does that process start? Because I think that's a little bit opaque for those of us that aren't in charge of opening new buildings or managing facilities.
Yeah, I would say that is a great question. I think an area that's through my career, I have a lot of lessons learned along the way. I've seen it done well and I've seen it done poorly. But at its best, a project of this magnitude is a cross-collaborative effort that is generally driven by the person overseeing finance, facilities, and operations. That may be one person, that may be a mixture person, and has a direct and close line to the executive office and school leadership team. One of the improvement areas that has historically surfaced in school development projects is viewing a project of this nature as cross-collaborative versus one that is owned by one person or one group of people. I think typically in the beginning of my career, what I often saw was you had your architects, you had your executive teams, and then you had your project team. And I think what that kind of surfaced was you were really missing some key perspectives to not only be able to design and build a space, but also have a space that's going to maintain throughout the course of time, both from a financial perspective, from a maintenance perspective, but also from a functionality perspective in terms of delivering on your school design. And while I think it's important for someone to be driving the ship in terms of owning, making sure that they're bringing the right people together, again, the right perspective, right decisions. It's even more important that that person or group leading the coordination efforts is ensuring that there's a full range of perspective and expertise at the table. And this is an area that Dream has really leaned into and really turned into a strength, both as a collaborative community in terms of that's in our DNA and how we approach our day-to-day work across all aspects of the organization. And so for us, it was about how do we build buildings that both communicate our values, drive our grow the whole child model forward, and can both maintain and sustain throughout the longevity of the organization in a way that's financially sustainable, operationally feasible from the maintenance perspective. And ultimately, you not only want to build beautiful buildings, but you also want to build buildings that can maintain and are going to last over time.
You mentioned you've been a little bit through the school of hard knocks on this and had some hard lessons along the way. And certainly, cross-department collaboration, getting perspectives and buy-in from the right people seems like it's been a hallmark of the work you've done at Dream. But before we talk about some of the kind of key insights or recommendations for others who have big facilities plans on the horizon, let's talk about what goes wrong. I want to unpack that a little bit more. Some of maybe the lessons learned along the way. Where does a building project or facilities planning tend to kind of go off the rails, or what are maybe some of the common challenges that you've observed?
Yeah, and I feel like I can talk for days on this and many lessons learned throughout my career. But I think a few common mistakes that we've learned and I've seen in my experience is first a reactive approach to managing facilities. As we grew within our organization, we initially didn't have the infrastructure for how we were managing our facilities. We didn't have a preventative maintenance plan. We didn't have no KPIs, no systems, no standard operating procedures, no ticketing system. And as a result, there were varying levels of service, and we were fixing one issue while another one surfaced. And it was very much a whack-a-mole situation due to the lack of infrastructure in place. The second thing is not having the right perspectives working together during the design phase. And this was true at the beginning of my time at Dream, but also in my previous experience. And I recall early on when I first started in operations, I remember this was pre-Dream, but there was a time where there was a classroom. It was an interior classroom. There was no lights, no windows, no ventilation. And I remember having to work with our custodial team and facilities team every single day. The room was 82 degrees. And imagine being a first grade student trying to sit in a room with no poor ventilation, no lights, and hot. That's probably going to be pretty difficult for an adult to be productive, yet alone a young person.
Right.
And all of that, I remember having conversations with our custodial engineer, and all of that came down to, architect designed this space, and there was not a facilities perspective on it, right? To be able to say, all right, what are all the operational implications of designing this room and or placing this room in this location? I think the next piece is lack of availability of asset information to manage cost over time. And this is something that we've had some growing pains at Dream, and we've learned quite a bit and really are starting to turn that into a strength for our organization. If you don't know what equipment you have, you don't know what needs to be maintained, how it needs to be maintained, how much it costs to be maintained. And this leads to the required service not taking place, which reduces the lifespan for that equipment, thus increasing the total cost of ownership over time. And it's going to be hard to get out that whack-a-mole mode if you don't have the necessary information to make a plan. And I would say the last piece is misalignment between your facilities plans and your strategic planning cycle. I think a common pitfall I often see is facilities departments creating plans and requesting for resources that are separate from the organizational priorities and strategic plan. And when the plan you're trying to drive forward seems separate or distinct from what the organization is trying to do, it's going to be a little bit more challenging to get the appropriate resources and buy it into your plans. So being able to see your facilities plans as an extension of your strategic plan is something that's pretty critical and area where often goes awry.
So just to recap, we've got lack of standard operating procedures or infrastructure, which leads to the reactive whack-a-mole problem. I think all of us can relate to that. Thinking about what actual assets do we have, not understanding the equipment, how to take care of it, even what's in the building, thinking about relationship with the executive team, strategic planning, all of those things. Missing those can result in challenges. Let's talk about sort of the flip side of these. So positively looking at some of the recommendations here that are kind of the inverse of some of those challenges. So when taking on big capital projects, one of the first things you mentioned was sort of the relationship between facilities and maybe like that architect you mentioned in the example you gave. Talk to us a little bit about kind of this idea of the importance of the design stage in a facility. So obviously you all have done some really large scale renovations, but let's talk sort of blanket recommendations, whether it's a school that's gotten approved to build a new building, whether it's a school who's renovating a building. It seems like that design stage is really important and having the right players at the table. Talk to us about why that's so critical as it ties back directly to facilities.
Yeah, I believe the design and build out phase is your most critical phase in any new build in my perspective. And the reason being is that this is the phase where you're gonna get ahead of costs. You're gonna determine functionality in alignment to your organizational's priorities and school model. Once the building is handed over, the plate of food has already been cooked, right? And design phase is really where you are, think of, you probably tell I'm a little hungry, but it's kind of like when you're developing the recipe before you go actually to go cook the meal. So it's going to be much more difficult for you to manage costs and design once the building is built, which is why the design phase is so critical before you get a hammer onto the floor. Make sure that you're all aligned into how the building is being built. And it's important that organizations approach this in a collaborative manner, aiming to provide as much diversity and perspective during this phase to ensure that the design has considered as many aspects of the day-to-day of the building as possible. Typically, it's best practice for organizations to consider the aesthetics of the design. How's it going to look? The functionality of the design, how's it going to work? The cost of the design, how much is it going to cost on an annual basis to be able to run this building? the operations, how does design facilitate all the different things you're trying to accomplish? And then the strategy, how does this align to the broader priorities for the organization? And being able to consider a design that's aligned to the priorities and model of the organization, is financially sustainable, can be maintained and operated efficiently, and at a cost, and is visually appealing. That's the name of the game. And to do this, you need to be able to have the different vantage points on each of these areas as to what will work and what may not.
What does it look like to balance maybe the passionate vision? I'm thinking of maybe the executive director and the architect who have grand plans for the aesthetic, which you mentioned is really critical. But then on the other side, you mentioned we need to be able to maintain this building. We need to be able to manage cost. Talk to us a little bit about that tension. Is there often trade-offs that have to be made around, we really like this aesthetic, but maybe these materials are super challenging to get replacement parts for? What does that look like in the design build phase? Is there kind of a push-pull there between facilities and maybe others at the table?
Yeah, I think it's definitely an ongoing conversation that is gonna iterate and evolve over time, and everyone's gonna bring their different perspective and expertise, and that means that some team members are gonna have different perspective as to what should be prioritized. I think the biggest piece, which goes back to the importance of having the right people at the table and as many perspectives as possible around these key areas. To ensure that when you're making decisions, you have the full picture of, all right, if we decide to design this in X way, here are all the considerations and implications for what that means. I would say anytime there are tensions like you described, one of the key pieces is how do you take that vision and make it concrete? So being able to do cost analysis. All right, if we build this in this way, here's annual costs, here's a 5-year cost, here's a 10-year cost, here's what it would look like over time. From a maintenance perspective, if this means this may look beautiful and it may be more challenging to maintain, and this is what it means for what staffing you need, how much that's going to cost, how many labor hours you're going to accrue, what types of supplies do you need, what type of services do you need. So one of the things that at Raymie really approach the work is from the vantage point of everything is possible with the right investments, and being able to have the full picture of what are the implications of making XYZ decisions to be able to determine what most aligns with our priorities and where we want to make our investments.
Let me ask maybe this is a silly question, or maybe a little in the weeds. How are you actually coming up with some of those costs? Like, is that you with your CFO kind of building a massive Excel model that's tracking, okay, in this room, we've got this, HVAC system, and we think we're going to have to spend X on maintenance? Is it that in the weeds and detailed, and then trying to kind of amortize that over 10 years? Like, what does that look for the lay person like myself on trying to understand these costs?
Yeah, I would say my perspective may be a little bit skewed, but we have best in class finance team, and our CFO, James DeCosmo, is quite an expert in this area. But what I would say is kind of 3 things. First, partnerships are key. One of the key partnerships we've developed is with an organization called DBI that it helps us launch our Tony Bruckner campus, our River Avenue campus. And they've been instrumental in helping us not only bring expertise to the table that we may otherwise lack, but also help us be able, from their experience in the sector, be able to, one, from a cost perspective, be like, here's typically what an organization similar to you would spend. Here's typically the services, what this would cost, what we would recommend. And then from our side is really a collaborative effort, both with our finance team, the DBI team, as well as our facilities and operations team and executive team, to really kind of put that full picture together. So it's being able to do some sector research in terms of, all right, a campus in similar square footage with similar design, what's the total cost of ownership for that? And then trying to bring to the table as much information as possible, which means doing a facilities assessment where you get to know what are all the assets in the campus. Being able to engage with the installers, the architects, to understand, all right, what's the recommended maintenance? What should be maintained? How often? How much is that going to cost? And really taking all that information to put together a full picture of all right, here's some projections and or here's what we expect over time. And that takes, go back to collaborative effort. Like that takes a lot of people at the table to be able to put that full picture together.
And move us to one of the other themes that came up when you were talking about sort of typical pitfalls, which is this idea of the importance of aligning your facilities goals with the broader strategic goals of the organization. What does that mean practically? How do you think about, for other operations facilities teams, how can they kind of marry their goals with a strategic plan that maybe they weren't even at the table for, since we were just talking about that as another challenge? What does it look like to take a facilities goal and have it mapped to, say, an academic goal? Talk to us a little bit about how you see those two things playing out.
Yeah, it's funny because there is a current project that we are working through that I think captures a great example of that. I mean, I think from early on in my career and experience, I think one of the common mistakes I made as someone who has overseen facilities for the entirety of his career was I was approaching it through a very narrow lens. So I would go through our principals, our executive team and say, hey, we need this new ticketing system for facilities. Here's all the reasons why. And while the reasons and rationale may have been valid, it lacked a broader perspective in terms of how does this initiative or plan fit into the broader organizational plans and priorities. So I think a perfect example is one of the things that is a priority in part of our strategic plan is our special education program. And I think related to our grow the whole child, our co-teaching model and grow the whole child model. And one of the things that we tackled facilities from is answering the question, how do we design spaces that's conducive to co-teaching and thus is able to strengthen our special education programming? So in our campuses, we have small group space, right? So right now we are currently working through one, is it designed in a way that's conducive for these small groups to happen at the highest level? Two, if not, what are design changes that we need to make? What are procurement changes that we need to make to ensure that that academic component of our school design is able to be delivered and moved forward at the highest level possible? So that's a perfect example of, like, from a narrow point of view, you would look at, oh, let's design this space that is clean and organized. But when you're able to take a step back and be like, all right, let's understand what the organization's priorities are. All right, it's strengthening our special education model. How does facilities fit into that? Okay, so we need to take a look at whether or not the design of our spaces and the type of furniture we have in those spaces, the technology we have, is actually conducive to being able to deliver on that model at the highest level.
Right. And I'd imagine those internal conversations are much easier to have when people are hearing and feeling that you get how this fits in directly into the goals that, the chief academic officer has, or, your head of schools have. You all are speaking the same language, as opposed to, this is a siloed facilities issue that I need you to help me solve. One of the other things that ties into this is, and you mentioned this earlier as well, is having a facilities plan. There's the strategic plan for the organization, but then it kind of assumes there's also a separate facilities plan, and you want the two to be connected, as you were just talking about. What is included in a typical facilities plan? Maybe thinking about the audience who, maybe someone just got put in a role where facilities is a part of their job, and maybe the former facilities leader left and there's not really a plan there. What are some of the things that people should be thinking about having in a kind of strategic facilities plan?
Yeah, I would say this is definitely something that, I've had the benefit and been blessed to be connected with a lot of experts that I've learned from and have been great mentors for me. And I think this is something that's also evolving over time and definitely in a much stronger place from when I first started, but is very much still evolving and growing. I would say when creating plans, there's three core elements that we think through. I think the first one is alignment with the organizational strategies. One of the things that we think about is, all right, what's the organizational priorities? How does facilities fit into that? And from that, we create our 5-year priorities. So we currently last year created our first 5-year plan with facilities. An example of a priority with that was one of the priorities in our last plan was around financial sustainability. So facilities fits into that in terms of, all right, well, we didn't have a preventative maintenance program, which was leading to increased costs. So that's something that we needed to create, as well as we didn't have a capital planning process. And that was also leading to increased costs. So we needed to create that. And that all aligned with the financial sustainability, broader priority for the organization. I think the second thing we think through in the plan is making sure that you have fully documented all of your assets at each of your campuses. And we did this via a facilities assessment and utilization analysis where we documented all of our asset inventory, which is all the equipment at each campus, recommended maintenance, which we engage with installers, asset costs, similarly installers, how much does it cost to install this unit or how much does this unit cost? A replacement timeline, similarly engaging with the installer to know how long do these units last. And then asset replacement costs. So if you're telling me this HVAC lasts about 10 years, and in 10 years, we got to spend X number of dollars, we need to know that so that we can create a capital savings strategy. The next piece is forecasting. When do assets get replaced? How much will it cost? And what's the capital savings strategy, as I said? You got to think through capital planning, align with the facilities investments with financial capacity as well as budget planning, and prioritizing capital projects and funding strategies that align with your organizational priorities. The plan includes sustainability, so it incorporates energy, efficiency, environmental factors, ensures facilities can withstand emergencies. So being able to build infrastructure around like what are your protocols, such as like, do you have an inclement weather protocol? Do you have a risk assessment protocol? Tech and infrastructure integration, so plans for digital transformation, IT infrastructure, as well as making sure that facilities support evolving learning and operational needs. And then risk management and compliance, so addressing regulatory requirements, safety codes, legal considerations, emergency preparedness plans, ADA compliance, and long-term maintenance. So those are some of the things that would encompass a facilities plan. But overarching priorities, your infrastructure, and then your financial information to be able to plan accordingly for the long term.
Just a few things you need to keep track of there. Just a couple.
Not much, right?
Not much. Yeah, not much at all. I want to ask about the capital strategy because obviously you gave a shout out to your CFO, James, earlier. It seems like so much of this requires really close coordination with the finance team. Is your capital strategy kind of an ongoing iterative process? Because I would imagine like there were so many moving parts just in what you described, whether it be our digital infrastructure, our energy costs, each of those categories you mentioned in and of themselves, there's expertise to be gained in those. And I would imagine it's very challenging to keep track of them all. How are you all kind of managing that capital strategy on an ongoing basis? Is it, hey, we have these sort of financial sustainability goals, but then we're meeting quarterly, monthly? Like, talk us through kind of practically what it looks like to manage the sort of shifting needs financially that are bound to happen with so many different, moving parts in a facility.
Yeah, I would say that's a great question, and you're asking it at a unique time for us. So this is part of the infrastructure work we've done. So this year we've launched our first ever capital planning process. So in previous years we were very much as a growing organization, very much still maturing from an infrastructure standpoint. So capital requests were done on a one-off basis. We're really determined by a small group of people. So the question we looked at answer going into this year was going back to the financial sustainability piece is like, how do we streamline this, make this more consistent, and create the infrastructure that incorporates this into our annual planning processes. So this year, our capital planning process was launched in unison with our annual planning processes. So that's your staffing processes, your budgeting processes. So this is an extension of that. And the capital strategy is really, for us, a long-term financial plan that guides how we acquire, allocate, manage capital resources to support our strategic goals. So some of the things that we did is as we built infrastructure, not only build a process, but also build the indicators by which we were evaluating projects. So things such as, is this project aligned to the strategic goals of the organization? Doing a feasibility assessment, like, is this capital project actually feasible from an implementation standpoint? Return on investment. Like if we decide to invest in this, what's the return? And really those different indicators to help determine what we invest in versus not. And then I would say going back to the infrastructure piece is really all of the information that we built and worked to capture helps inform like what the strategy is to be able to invest in these capital projects. So like if we know that 15 years from now, we need to replace the roof at one of our campuses, what's our approach to making sure that year by year, we're setting money aside in the bank to be able to, by year 15, be able to invest in that project. So those are things that we have, again, in my perspective, the dopest board in the game. So we've been able to really tap in a lot of experts who do this for a living, and get some really solid best practices in terms of how we're both, from a process standpoint, determining what projects to focus on and prioritize, and how we're getting the financial resources to be able to afford those projects.
All right, as we come to a close, I want to ask some rapid fire questions in no particular order. So let's say a school has just completed a new build, everyone's excited, and the keys get handed over to the operations facilities team. What would be your recommended tips? You can pick however many you want, maybe top 3 tips for starting off on a good note for managing that building.
Yeah, this is I laugh because we've learned some hard lessons throughout my career. But I think the first thing is, before you even take the keys, make sure you get all the information you need on the front end. Closeout packages matter. And by closeout packages, I mean the people installing, constructing the building. You want to make sure that you get all of the information you need to be able to maintain the building over time. From, again, recommended maintenance to getting your manuals to getting recommended service providers to anticipated costs. Getting that information on the front end is going to make your life much easier and your work much easier on the long run as an organization. I would say the second piece is partnership between campus occupants. One of the things that we've made a lot of progress on is it really takes our entire community to really run, operate, and maintain our buildings. Things such as we currently have we call it the home committee, that's comprised of both network and school staff that's responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of these campuses. But it takes the entire organization to be able to maintain those campuses. So being able to build that type of culture will serve you in the long run. And then I would say is building the infrastructure. And by infrastructure, like concretely, making sure that you have the systems in place, making sure that you have indicators by which you are measuring the health of your buildings, measuring whether the buildings are meeting your expectations or not, and then making sure that you are organizing your information in a way where anyone at any time can reference to make decisions. So from getting your CAD drawings and floor plans, where are you organizing it? How are people accessing it? To building playbooks. What's your inclement weather protocol? What's your emergency preparedness protocol? Who's doing what? And making sure that the right people have the right access to those documents and that they withstand over time, I think is super critical.
All right, my next question is, let's say nobody heeded your advice and there's no information anywhere on any of the equipment. What's a cheat code or a recommendation for doing that process when maybe you have no idea how old some of the equipment is? I'm sure that's a common situation. What do you recommend? Is it like trying to track down the companies and get them to send out a repair person and have conversations with them? How do you start if maybe none of the pre-work got done and you're sort of stuck in the middle and you're thinking, oh man, this feels, we've got stuff all over the place. What's the one recommendation?
Well, I'll just tell you my experience. This is definitely a lesson learned that my team and I learned. But I would say we were in that position. And I think the first thing where we had to start is really leverage your resources. And by resources, meaning people resources as well. And so are there any experts that can help you understand what questions to answer and where and how to gather the information? And then I would say the second piece is like one thing that has proven super helpful for us is not only our partnership with DBI, but making sure you have the right context. So from the architects to the engineers to, anyone managing the construction projects, staying in contact with them so that they connect you with the right people. Whether that's, we still have the HVAC installers contact information. They can help you get the maintenance manual. Or whether that's, hey, we're not in contact with the, boiler installer, but we use these vendors. Here's someone who can help you out. And then I would say the last piece is one of the things that we've systematized that has been super helpful is anytime we open a new campus, we conduct a facility assessment. With our Tony Bruckner campus, we did that once the building was launched, which was quite challenging. But we learned our lesson and were able to make improvements going into our River Avenue campus, where we did that as the building was being constructed because we had access to the installers in real time. So being able to do that facility assessment and documenting all of the assets, all of the maintenance, all of the costs is going to help you run those buildings and manage costs over time.
All right, third and final rapid fire question. What's the next facilities project that you have on the docket for yourself and the team that you've got that you're looking at for the next 6 months?
Yeah, I think right now is really we have 3 amazing, beautiful buildings. I think right now with our campuses is really trying to identify the project earlier, is really trying to make sure that the design of our spaces is conducive to our co-teaching model. So I'd say that's a big project that we're collaborating with our school and network leaders on, and one that I personally have a lot of excitement because, to be able to know that, our departments is contributing to helping create the environment for students to learn, play, and grow at the highest level. Like that's the name of the game, and something that our team feels motivated by, feels super enthusiastic for.
Yeah, that's powerful. Awesome. All right. Well, Raymie, where can people go to learn more about Dream? Where can they go to connect with you? Where should we send them?
Yeah, listen, you can visit our website. It is wearedream.org. You can also reach out to me via, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can also shoot me an email. My email is rfernandez@wearedream.org. And I'm always down for a good tour, a good visit. So anyone interested in come and take a look at what we've been able to build, I'm always open for it. But yeah, you can reach me or visit our website.
Awesome. I can attest. Raymie's a great tour guide. He will deliver for sure. And then last question, we always ask if there's any books, resources, articles, other recommendations that we can link to in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. 3 key resources. So one of the books that I carry side by side is Kathy Roper and Richard Piant's The Facility Management Handbook. That is my guide. It has anything and everything for facilities management that's been instrumental into our approach. The IFMA Foundation, so International Facilities Management Association, is a great resource, great networking tool as well. And then I've had the benefit of working with a pretty powerful group that has a lot of experience in facilities. So there's this organization called PSWRX. Akila Johnson, who did a lot of facilities and real estate work at KIPP, has been someone who has coached and supported me throughout my facility experience. And they do a lot of facilities work and help a lot of schools with facility stuff. So they're definitely, if you're looking for help, they're definitely people to go to.
Love it. Awesome. All right. Well, Raymie, thanks again for the time and for sharing your experiences. It was great having you on.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Charter School Insider. This show is brought to you by BuyQ, the group purchasing organization specifically for charter schools. Want to learn how to maximize your school's purchasing power? Join together with thousands of other charter schools by visiting buyq.org/sign-up. BuyQ's purchasing program is free and has no obligations or commitments required. If you enjoyed today's episode, do us a favor and subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. If you have a question or feedback for us, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at podcast@byq.org. Thanks, and we hope you'll tune in for the next one.